Another time, they thought that a woman called the St. Louis office of the FBI and said she had met this guy in the bar last night in downtown St. Louis, and she spent the night with him, and he said he's Black Charlie Harris, you know, have you heard of me, and all this kind of stuff, you know, and then they said, but for example, turned out to be that she turned out to be a quote notorious liar, and so on. Stuff like this, you know, they found bones buried in some rural part of Wayne County, and they thought maybe that was Harris, but then they turned out to be the bones of a deer. This is all in the FBI report, but it's really quite fascinating. But anyway, then I had to get. He spent 10 years in Leavenworth Prison from 1928 to 1938. I had to get those prison records, which I got through the Federal Archives regional office in Kansas City, and they were incredible detail. They would have conversations where Harris was sworn off to a guard, and the guard would come back, and Harris would, you know, he'd be thrown in isolation for 2 weeks or whatever. You talk about a federal prison being tough. Harris got 3 days in a solitary confinement because he asked for a second helping of spaghetti. This is in the prison record on Harris, right? And so that got him, you know, and he wasn't supposed to do that. Oh, yes, sir.
When your book on the Sheldons came out, I read a review in the Peoria Journal-Star.
Yeah.
And they alluded to a connection with the Sheldons and Colchester, but I never found anything beyond that.
Colchester, which is kind of up around,
Just west of Macomb.
yeah, around Macomb. All I can tell you there, Colchester's not mentioned in my book.
No.
All I can tell you about Colchester is that would have been part of Shelton territory. Nobody would have run a dice game or sold illegal booze in, is that Hancock County or McDonough County?
It should be McDonough County.
Hancock?
No, McDonough.
McDonough, okay. Nobody in McDonough County would operate a dice game or roulette wheel or sell booze without permission from a Shelton or one of the Shelton agents. I can tell you that. But that applied everywhere, you know. But I never discovered anything about Colchester that really would.
Well, the paper alluded to either a strong family connection or a business connection.
In writing about my book, did they?
Yes.
I remember some of the
it was
stuff
a
the
review
Peoria
of
Journal-Star
your book.
wrote. I just don't remember bringing in Colchester.
Well, I
But
remember.
there's stuff written that I don't ever see, so maybe you
That
saw
was the
something.
connection.
Yeah,
And
maybe
they
you saw
said they
something
didn't
like
go on
that.
about it, so
Yeah.
I always wondered what the connection would have been, but that was it. I thought maybe you might have done it.
Nothing out of the ordinary that I know of. Nothing more than saying, you know, you couldn't do the same thing in Danville or Charleston or Paris or what have you without permission from one of from a Shelton. Yeah. But anyway, I got the prison records, and then I even got the transcript of the 1928 trial in federal court in Detroit that led to Harris's 10-year prison sentence in Leavenworth, and that was tough to do, but I managed to get that.
What was the charge in that?
Okay, great question. Charlie Harris grew up idolizing the Sheldons. In fact, at one time, and all these people came out of what's called the Pond Creek neighborhood in the eastern part of Wayne County. Okay. And Charlie was a little bit younger than the Shelton boys, but they were his idols. Okay. And I will tell you, in fact, for a while, you know, Charles Shelton, when he was 18 or 19, taught Sunday school. True. And Charlie was in his class. But anyway, I point that out to indicate the feelings between the two. Well, Harris goes out to Arizona and tries to get a job as a laborer out there. And he gets in trouble with an altercation, and he stabs a cop in Phoenix. So there's a brief trial out there, he's found guilty, and he's sentenced to 14 years in a state prison in Arizona, which is still going. It's in Florence, Arizona, and it's a real hellhole. And so Charlie serves his time there. And when he gets out, he goes to Detroit, where he's got a half-sister living. Black Charlie Harris had about 17 half-brothers and half-sisters. His father was married twice, had about 17 kids by his first wife, and then had about another 5. Charlie was maybe the youngest of the 5 by a second wife. Okay. So he's got a half-sister in Detroit who's married to a leader of the Carpenters Union, a master carpenter. So Charlie goes up there to train to be a carpenter in Detroit. Well, this is in Prohibition. And a big point of, during Prohibition, a big point of importation for the illegal booze, a lot of it came through Canada. And they brought it across the Detroit River, from Windsor, across the Detroit River, into Detroit. And the major bootleggers all had contacts, people who represented them in Detroit to make the purchases of the illegal booze. Well, the Sheltons needed somebody up there, and they knew Harris was a young guy up there, was an apprentice carpenter in Detroit, okay? And so they engaged Charlie, because, you know, they knew they'd always wanted to be part of their gang. They engaged Charlie to be their agent in Detroit, and they would ship him money to purchase booze being brought illegally across the Detroit River in the United States, okay? So, on one of these occasions, the money they shipped him was counterfeit. Yeah, counterfeit. He didn't know it. So, this is interesting. So Charlie pays off this illegal booze importer with the counterfeit money. This guy goes to his bank in Detroit to deposit the money, and the bank folks tell him, can't do it, this is counterfeit money. So this guy's really mad. So this is interesting, this is the big bootlegger. He goes to treasury agents. They're supposed to be enforcing prohibition, right guys? They're not interested in that, but they are interested in counterfeiting. And he says, there's this guy here who paid me whatever counterfeit money. Harris is arrested, and he goes to trial in federal court in Detroit. He is found guilty, was acquitted by a jury, and he's sentenced to 10 years in Leavenworth prison. And it was there that he decided that he had been done in by the Sheltons, his idols. And when he got out, he spent a little more time yet with the Sheltons when he got out. They gave him some little penny ante jobs. I mean, like for example, Carl Shelton was crazy about, the Sheltons were crazy about like roller skating. Okay. Carl had a portable roller rig. He'd have it for 1 month in this town, then he'd have it over here in the next town, and his sister Lula operated it, and they hired Charlie to help Lula operate the portable roller skating rink. Okay? Yeah, all right. So Charlie did that because he needed money, but he had this hatred for the Sheltons. Also, at Leavenworth was interesting because Charlie was in there with Machine Gun Kelly, a couple of Walt Walker's sons. He met all these people, and he was a much more polished, he had a much more polished criminal mind when he came out of Leavenworth after 10 years. But his first bunkmate at Leavenworth was another young punk in the Shelton organization who had been assigned to be the chief guard of a still near Collinsville. And when Treasury agents raided the still, he slugged the Treasury agent, and that was a no-no. You couldn't do that, okay? So he got 10 years at Leavenworth about the same time. They didn't know each other, but his name was Buster Workman. Okay. He and Charlie are bunkmates for the first year at Leavenworth. And all they talk about, and B. Rowley told me this out in Kansas, she said all they talked about was their hatred for the Sheltons. And if they could, what they were going to do someday when they got back out. And boy, were those Sheltons going to pay. And boy, they did. But that's getting ahead of the story. But anyway, it's interesting. They were only bunkmates for a year because Workman was a very unruly prisoner. He wouldn't abide by the rules at Leavenworth. So they shipped him off to Alcatraz out in San Francisco Bay for the last 9 years of his life. But he got out. And when they got out, Workman very rapidly, he was based in East St. Louis. Workman became the downstate agent, the downstate emissary, the downstate boss for the Chicago organization, became a major organized crime leader, running not just St. Clair and Madison counties, but also across the river in St. Louis. And Charlie and Workman hooked up in starting in the mid-1940s, and the first big thing that they were definitely involved in planning was the assassination of Carl Shelton in October 1947. So that's why, that's a long answer to your question of why what he was on trial for in Detroit and why he went to Leavenworth for 10 years. Yes, ma'am.
About it all the time.